Let's start with the trade war. So
Yeah.
it's starting there because it seems like Trump is taking a pause on Mexico and Canada.
Yeah.
Now, can you just explain the whole thing? What is the purpose of this whole operation? I mean, what is he doing here? Can you explain?
Right. Well, can I just say, I mean, asking a question like that is trying to understand Donald Trump, which is not easy at
No,
any point in time. I
no.
mean, it could be that he simply doesn't know what he's doing. And I think we have to accept this possibility that this is just, he's doing one thing one day, something completely different the next,
Uh-huh,
and that there's just no method in it. It's all just madness and unpredictability.
uh-huh,
Or it could be that he is indeed following a certain agenda. Now, I think he is following an agenda. This is the way Trump likes to work. He likes to create an appearance of chaos.
uh-huh,
And he's one of those people who thinks that he can shape the chaos and control it in
okay,
order to pursue his long-term projects.
uh-huh,
So he's talked an awful lot in the last couple of months, and last year, in fact,
uh-huh,
about what a great thing tariffs are, that the United States needs to revert to tariffs, that tariffs were what made America great in the past. And he's absolutely right. Between about 1860 and, well, until about 1930, the 1930s, the US did indeed have very, very high tariffs, and they did help American industry to develop at that time. But of course, that was another economic age, as we've discussed in previous programs. But he's seems to have convinced himself, and I think he really is serious about this, that this is the way back for America to go. It goes back to a world of high tariffs. They will enable US domestic industry to take off, and
mhm,
they will generate so much revenue for the federal government that it can actually pay off its debt and lower its taxes and
mhm,
return to the path of purity and light. And I mean, he talks in this way. And with Trump, I think that there is an element of sincerity in this. So he comes along, he talks about tariffs, and he's looking to enforce tariffs against countries that he wants to put economically in their place.
mhm,
But he's got a problem, which is that the way he presents tariffs is that they're also a revenue raising measure.
mhm,
Now, raising revenue is a constitutional prerogative of Congress. So if you're going to start to impose very high tariffs on all kinds of countries, um, then arguably, I think there is a strong constitutional case, and it's one that is being made in the United States itself. You have to get act of Congress to do that. You can't simply do it by executive order. For the
mhm,
moment, Trump hasn't gone to Congress and hasn't asked Congress to approve high tariffs. But he wants to get people talking about tariffs, and he wants to get people thinking about tariffs. So he seized on this issue of fentanyl, which he says is being imported into the United States by all sorts of wicked and malevolent outsiders. The fact that there's a demand for fentanyl within the United States, and I am going to make a guess, by the way, I suspect an awful lot of production of fentanyl inside the United States. I have no doubt of that at all, by the way. I'm sure that most of the fentanyl that is consumed in the United States
mhm,
is produced in the United States. I don't have any figures for this, but that's my guess.
mhm,
Anyway, but it's typical of Trump. All the problems, all the bad things come from outsiders. They come from Canada because they
mhm,
can't control the border. They come from Mexico, and we know that Mexicans are bad people altogether. They have cartels. They allow migrants to enter the country. Their president is a Marxist or a semi-Marxist and all of that kind of thing. They come from China. The fentanyl also comes from China. And of course, China is this particularly bad and wicked place. So he uses fentanyl as an excuse to pass an executive order which imposes tariffs. And he says that these executive orders that he's passed are constitutionally and legally justified because they are there to deal with a criminal emergency. This massive importation of fentanyl from these outside countries. So, of course, what then happens is that the leaders of these countries, and we're talking here about Canada and Mexico, which are in a position of great vulnerability because as a result of free trade agreements that they were coerced by the United States to enter into with the United States way back in the Reagan era in the early 1980s. As I well remember, these economies, Canada's and Mexico's economies, have been shaped around exporting to the United States. In Canada's case, it's led to a major process of deindustrialization, by the way, because Canada now imports manufactured goods to the United States and it exports raw materials and food and things like that to the United States. It'd be in a very serious state if trade with the United States was stopped. In Mexico, it's actually the opposite. It's led to a kind of industrialization in Mexico, where it's an industrialization exclusively focused on producing goods with cheap labor for the American market. So the governments of Mexico and Canada, they come on their hands and knees to Donald Trump and they say, please, 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 can you lift these tariffs, 25% tariffs on our goods? We understand that there is this problem with fentanyl. We're going to do all these things to try and control the export of fentanyl to your country. We're going to send troops to the border. We're going to start imposing controls on the border. We're going to do all of these things. And of course, at that point, Trump says, yes, that's fine. We'll do that. We will put the tariffs on pause, though not for very long, by the way. 30 days for Canada, 50 days for Mexico. But what he's doing by this is, in America, he's getting people accustomed to the idea of tariffs. Not just tariffs against China, which Americans have been taught over the last 10 years to see as, you know, the great enemy and rival and adversary, but tariffs on America's neighbors, and certainly in the case of Canada, an American ally and friend. So it changes the environment and the political mood. Now, Trump, of course, the country that he's really going to target with tariffs is China. He's in a stronger legal position to do it because there's already been tariffs that he imposed on China in his first term. And of course, Biden increased tariffs on China also and went much further than Trump did in the first term. So Trump is coming along. He's again using the issue of fentanyl, which is pure propaganda. I mean, it's absolute mischief. There's no reality to that at all. And can I just say, again, I speak as a British person, the idea of China exporting drugs, illegal drugs, to anybody who knows the history will know this is a pretty rich allegation for Westerners to make. I mean, if you spend any time here in Britain, you see all of these countries, you know, all these big companies, British companies, that we all know that they became rich through the export of opium to China, Jardine Matheson and all of these places. They're still huge here, by the way. They're enormous companies and they've never apologized or paid the Chinese people back for anything, any of that. Anybody who knows about Chinese attitudes to illegal drugs will know what a fantastic idea this is. Anybody who knows anything about the history will know what a grotesque allegation that is. But again, he's using it once again, firstly, to put the Chinese on the back foot, and also to accustom people to further tariffs on China, and to, shape opinion around the issue of tariffs and around this impression of China as some kind of adversary or enemy. Now, there's going to be apparently a telephone call between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump next week, supposedly on Tuesday. I'm going to make a prediction. Xi Jinping is not going to be the pushover that the president of Mexico and the prime minister of Canada was. I have a rule which on the internet, on YouTube, has become famous. I've said that there are two iron rules in international relations. Rule one, you do not march on Moscow, because if you do, you will be defeated. Rule two, you do not bluff China, because your bluff will always be called. And that is what is going to happen on Tuesday when Donald Trump speaks to Xi Jinping.
Yeah. He also has been talking about putting tariffs for European Union, right? So that I don't know what to make of that. So, like you said, he's very serious about this tariff thing, as it's not just about Mexico, Canada, China, seems to me like. And I think even though he didn't say anything about South America, but I think Lula and even Malay, they have been in discussion about how to deal with this if this happens. So it seems like everybody is now very unsettled at this point. But well, but here's the thing. Now you say tariff works for the United States in the past, but isn't that also it worked until the Great Depression, isn't it? Some people saying that has something to do with the protectionism. What do you take on that?
Absolutely. Well, can I just make a quick observation about the past? There is a very, very, very famous English novel which starts with the words, "The past is another country. People do things differently there." And that is something that everybody in politics, and by the way, in history, needs to understand. What made sense in the past may not make any sense today. It's just the world today is not the world that existed in the 1890s. The United States of today is a completely different country from the country that it was in 1890. And assuming that imposing tariffs of the kind that existed in the 1890s is going to reproduce the economic results of the 1890s is historically and economically illiterate. It doesn't work like that. Now, as a matter of fact, you are absolutely right. America pursued policies of protectionism. For a time, they worked quite well. But the overwhelming consensus amongst historians and economic historians and economists today is that by the 1930s, these massive tariffs that actually got even higher after the First World War were economically disastrous and were one of the major causes, and perhaps the major cause, of the Great Depression of the 1930s. So it's absurd to think that because something worked for a time in the past, it's going to work today.
Also, maybe I'm cynical. I don't know. I feel like whatever Trump does, it seems like there is some kind of somewhere hidden with some money. So, for example, this deal that he supposedly get from both Mexico and Canada. So Canada promised to put in 1.3 billion in border security, and Mexico will put in 1.5. They pledged 1.5 billion in the so-called smart border, supposedly to use some modern technology to secure the border. I just feel like in both cases, I don't know, some U.S. companies, possibly Trump's friend, they are going to make money out of it. Am I too cynical about
Of course
this?
they are. No, you're not cynical at all. Of course they are. By the way, that is a feature of American politics nowadays. Always you will find people who support these things, whatever these moves are, and always you have to look at financial and economic self-interest, because it is always there. In America today, it is always there. Let us take the example of Elon Musk. Just saying, his company, his major company, Tesla, is now starting to sag in the United States. He's obviously got very, very big investments in China, as we know. China has been welcoming to him up to now, but he's up against, in China, very, very strong Chinese competition from Chinese manufacturers. They're going to do very well in China. It's probably going to be very difficult for Tesla to continue to grow in China. And in fact, entirely because of economic and industrial developments in China, we might start to see Tesla retreat. So what do? You try to control the American market, the automotive market. You keep away Chinese cars. So you provide protection from Tesla, for Tesla, in its home market. If you think that there is no aspect to this behind all that we're saying, you are absolutely wrong. The same applies to every other field. Always someone, somewhere, at some level, is going to benefit from what happens. And you're quite right. Tariffs against Canada, tariffs against Mexico, you put them up, you do a shakedown. The Canadians and the Mexicans pay money. Some of that money goes to your friends. That's the way America works.
And the other thing, Trump also announced that U.S. Postal Services is going to stop taking packages from Shein and Tmall, both Chinese companies. Okay, yeah. I myself buy things from Tmall. But what's interesting to me is that he didn't say, okay, no packages from China. I'm not sure if he can do that, but anyway, so that's not what he's saying. Yeah. He said USPS Postal Services are not taking.
Yeah, which it's a way. Go on, yeah.
Which means FedEx and the UPS, they can. Isn't it? Yeah. Isn't that disrupting the competition?
Well, of course it is. It's exactly what it's intended to do. It's exactly what I said. It's again abusing your political control. You're imposing blockade on particular Chinese businesses in order to benefit American ones. It's as simple as that.
And in terms of FedEx and the UPS, actually, I looked, both are big Republican donors. Yeah. And UPS, for example, they have been openly supporting Republican candidates, running against other candidates. Yeah. And the candidates that they support are often very anti-union, for example. Yeah. So Trump also portrayed himself like he's on the workers' side, and there are even some, I think, smaller unions endorsed him or something. But here we have, he clearly is doing something to benefit UPS, and which in turn support candidates, Republican candidates against unions. So the whole thing, I don't know, smells not right to me.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're pointing very well to the inconsistencies. I mean, you have Donald Trump. He goes around, he visits all these industrial places. He talks to the working class people there. He gives them the impression that he's on their side. He talks their talk. He directs complaints against the Democrats and China as well. Talks in that kind of a way. He probably believes this all at some level. At the same time, he is a predatory capitalist and businessman. His friends are all predatory capitalists and business people. They don't like organized labor. Predatory capitalists have never liked organized labor anywhere. and he makes sure that organized labor is crushed. So it's all in his own mind. There's probably some consistency here. Those of us who are not part of that mind or mindset probably can't see this consistency, but he probably still believes that there is, that somehow doing away with unions, crushing organized labor is going to release the energies of the American workers and lead to an economic boom. People always have this incredible ability to believe what is actually in their own financial interest. And I think Donald Trump takes that to an extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. One more thing is about the sovereign wealth fund that he's now proposing. Sounds to me like possibly another slush fund. I don't know. Because
that's exactly what it would be.
Because even Larry Fink, the BlackRock CEO, he has a grandson that is pretty active on TikTok. Yeah. But they're families, they don't get along very well. So he doesn't seem so appreciative of that side of his family. So he openly said that. He said, okay, my other side, that side of the family, people are telling me this whole sovereign wealth fund, that they're going to make huge amount of money. I mean, they openly discuss that one. Yeah. So just give you an idea.
Well, of course, I mean, America is structurally incapable of running a sovereign wealth fund. I mean, a real one. In any case, it makes little sense to even talk about that for an economy like the American. I mean, what the United States needs to do is get its budget and its debt issues sorted out. And, sovereign wealth funds are for another time in the far future when all of that is operating and succeeding. I mean, a country that's going to set up a sovereign wealth fund needs to have a surplus on its current account by definition. The United States doesn't have that. It runs a massive deficit on its current account. So what are you talking about when you talk about a sovereign wealth fund, and who is going to administer it? By definition, the same predatory capitalists that are Donald Trump's friends. And as you absolutely rightly say, it's going to be a slush fund, nothing else.
Yeah, the Stargate is the slush fund for the tech people, and then the slush fund is for the Wall Street people, the financial guys.
Correct. Can I just say something? It's no different with the previous bunch. I mean, Biden came up with lots of money that was going to transform America into the biggest chip manufacturer. Remember all of that? That they were going to build all these chips in all of these places, all of these factories were going to be created. The US would reestablish its leadership in chips and in advanced chips. Nothing happened. Of course, an awful lot of people became very rich on the back of all this money. But if you're actually talking about real factories, real jobs, real industries being recreated, of course, that never happened. And it can't happen unless you completely reorganize the entire American economy in ways that neither Biden nor Trump want to do.
Yeah. So can we say that in principle, Trump actually can sense the sentiment, the public sentiment, better than Biden and Harris, than the Democrats. And possibly he even, like you said, he even believed in some of those things. Yeah. But the reality is he can never really forget the main thing for him, his family, his friends, and that is to make money, right? They would never.
Well, but bear something in mind, that this anyway is the American ethos, the idea in America very much, and has always been, that everybody should set out to make as much money as they can, and by making as much money as they can, that will make America altogether rich. So it's very much this psychology, which is very hardwired into the American psyche. And, it worked for a while. I mean, let's not say that it didn't work, but it's becoming increasingly ill-adapted to the modern world. And in my opinion, you could already see the problems with this approach as far back as the 1960s. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
It really isn't suitable, and it doesn't address today's problems. And the trouble is, someone like Donald Trump will never understand that. I mean, he would call that socialism. If you made those kind of criticisms, if you said to him, look, if you're going to really try and achieve all of the things you want to do, you need to control regulation,
Mm-hmm.
increase planning,
Mm-hmm.
engage in more collective activities. I mean, to him, that's the reverse of what he believes and what he instinctively thinks is true.
I think possibly he even think he's justified. He and his friend
Yeah,
make that money because they
yeah,
are reforming. In their view, they're reforming the
yeah,
country, and there's
yes.
nothing wrong in that process. They make some money out of it, right? So that's the view.
Absolutely. You know, they're saying to themselves, we're going to make everybody rich.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's only right that we should make ourselves rich too. And this is, and again, you know, if you know your American history, you will know that this has always been true. It's always been it's always been the way. Now, you know, one mustn't take extremes. I mean, if we talk about a country like China, as we know, does give plenty of opportunity for people to
Mm-hmm.
make themselves better off.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this has been, by the way, it's always been true, in my opinion. I mean, people have a very distorted view of recent Chinese history. But anyway, but that's very much the attitude in China. But that also goes hand in hand with a very clear understanding that there are some things that Chinese society must do collectively. That doesn't exist in America today.
About this conversation that's supposed to going to happen next Tuesday
Yeah.
between Xi Jinping and Trump, it's a little bit confusing to me because like 1.5 days ago, just they were talking about okay, Xi Jinping and Trump is going to supposedly going to talk to Xi Jinping within 24 hours. They were talking
Mm,
initially, but then like late yesterday, I saw articles saying no hurry. There is no hurry for
mm,
them to talk. But now it seems like they are going to talk next Tuesday. What is
mm.
going on here? Is it that it seems like Trump is more eager to talk to Xi Jinping? Am I right?
You're absolutely correct. I mean, it doesn't remind you of something else. I mean, you know, Trump comes along, becomes president, he's inaugurated, he's letting everybody think that he's going to be talking to Putin immediately.
Yeah.
Days pass, weeks pass, there's no such meeting, there's no step taken to organizing a meeting. I put it to a Russian official, by the way, no secret, Ambassador Polyansky, that in fact Trump was expecting Putin to call him. He thought that Putin was desperate to speak to Trump. And of course, Putin isn't desperate to speak to Trump. And I think exactly the same. So, you know, he imposes these sanctions on China. He says, I expect to speak to Xi Jinping today or tomorrow. He's expecting Xi Jinping to be really horrified and shocked that America is imposing these sanctions on China. And he's expecting Xi Jinping to come crawling on his hands and knees. And of course, he's not going to. There's no way Xi Jinping is going to do that. So then, you know, oh, actually, no hurry. We're not in any hurry to do this. And then actually, we do need to speak to Xi Jinping. It's actually quite urgent because China is so important to our economy. And if they start taking really tough retaliatory measures, which they are now starting to do, that will hurt us rather a lot. So, of course, we get the call set up for Tuesday. So you could see the evolution. Again, this utterly inflated idea of how strong America is, and the assumption that everybody else is weak and will jump at America's bidding. Panama might do so. Canada might do so. Mexico might do so. China won't. It's total misunderstanding of the power dynamics between these two countries.
Yeah, I think he's still, in that sense, he's still like the rest of the US elite, is still not quite there yet to understand countries like Russia and China, they're just different from Canada and Mexico. They're not,
Absolutely.
right? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
The other thing, a little bit surprising to me is that
Mm.
he's so clearly seems like he's going to clear cut want to get rid of USAID. The website is not working
Yes.
now even.
Mm.
And there is a huge reaction to that. I guess the existing, deep state people are horrified by that, shocked
Mm.
by it. Um, but I have a little bit of a question here. Now, according to Elon Musk, he's saying they are doing even like a criminal things. It sounds to
Mm.
be really bad. No surprise there. But his recommendation, the DOGE recommendation, is get rid of it altogether. But
Mm.
then they are put USAID now under the State Department,
Yeah.
under Marco Rubio. Now, Rubio is a traditional, to me, is a traditional, globalist,
Mm.
color revolution kind of guy.
Mm.
So now it's under his control. What
Mm.
is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, this constant tension within the administration itself. I mean, Rubio's been saying some very extraordinary things. I mean, he gave an interview to Megyn Kelly last week,
Mm-hmm.
in which he said that the unipolar era is ended, that
Mm-hmm.
we're into a position of multipolarity, that the United States is one great power amongst several, that the Chinese and the Russians act in their own self-interest and we should
Yeah.
start doing the same,
Mm-hmm.
and that our business is to return to diplomacy and to use diplomacy in order to avoid conflict with the other great powers. All excellent things,
Yes.
things that we would be delighted to hear. So you do get that side. But of course, at the same time, we know perfectly well that Marco Rubio has always in the past never seen a war that he didn't want to join. He's always been incredibly aggressive, very neocon minded,
Mm-hmm.
very much a disciple of American power, and absolutely not someone who objects to regime change operations around the world. In fact, he wants to carry them out in Cuba, in Venezuela, across Latin America, and all of those places that really interest him. So you have this division within the administration between some people who say, look, we're overextended, we can't go on doing this, and others who say, well, let's take a step back. We can't just give up now. We've got all of these interests. We've got to keep our empire going. And of course, they're supported by the deep state, by all of these organizations and all of these things. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think about USAID. I think that there is a genuine intellectual critique of US aid from people like Elon Musk. I
Mm-hmm.
think that Elon Musk and people within the team, the Trump team, who think like him, do generally think that the United States needs to retrench and needs to focus on its immediate heartland,
Mm-hmm.
and really that all of these regime change operations in all sorts of places like Hong Kong and elsewhere are counterproductive. So I think there is that element, and I think that explains partly the attack on USAID. And I think if it was left to Elon Musk, he would simply close it down.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are others who say, well, it's still a useful tool. We need to keep it going. Besides this, constitutional issues about closing down. Yes, it was created as a result of an executive order by President Kennedy, but it is part of the the National Assistance Act that the Congress passed in 1961. There might be constitutional issues, but they want to keep it going because they believe that it still serves a useful purpose. And I think there's Trump himself. And I think in Trump's case, the reason he hates USAID, with Trump, the political is always personal, is because USAID, as we've now gradually come to understand, partly funded many of the think tanks, organizations, and things like that, which opposed Trump in his first term and during the period when Biden was there. And that it is very, very strongly associated, it seems, with George Soros, and
Yeah.
George Soros absolutely is Donald Trump's enemy. So I think all of that is playing out all the time. So, people want to close it down. Trump says, yeah, let's close it down. They really hate me there. They're my enemies, so I must close it down. And others like Rubio says, oh, hold on, we don't want to close it down. It might not be legal to do. And besides, it can actually be useful in some places and in some ways. So you're getting this tension.
Now, it's interesting. I also saw a Rubio interview with Fox, not Megyn Kelly, somebody else. He also talked about, maybe it is, but anyway, so he also talked about how USAID is out of control. So it sounds to me like this is a very arrogant organization as well. He said when he was a senator, when the Senate were trying to get in touch with USAID to get some information or something, they basically just told them, you don't have authority over me. They even don't think that they are U.S. government can have any authority over them. They think that they are some kind of a global charity organization. Now that I think probably play into that as well, that the USAID simply angered many people, that this is an organization that is a combination of globalist and deep state that is so deep that they forget, anybody could have any oversight over them. I think that's probably play part of that too, that they anger too many people in Washington. Do you think?
I think that is indisputably true. And of course, it is characteristic of the entire deep state altogether. That, I mean, the permanent state, the permanent bureaucracy in the United States has steadily escaped political control. It has increasingly arrogated to itself the right to determine foreign policy and even domestic policy to a great degree. And partly what we are seeing in Washington play out now is a last desperate attempt, I think, by the elected politicians, Trump and Rubio and the others, to try to bring this runaway train, which is the deep state, finally back under control. So you see this attack on USAID. Basically, it's closed down. It's become utterly arrogant. You see the sacking of practically everybody in the National Security Council, which, remember, launched the first impeachment attempt against Donald Trump. I mean, it originated within the staff of the National Security Council, because Trump, they were suspicious of his policies with respect to Ukraine. We've had similar purges being conducted within the FBI and the Justice Department. That's now apparently going to extend to the CIA itself. But of course, USAID is perhaps the totemic agency, because as it is not strictly a government department, political control over it has been even weaker, which is why it has been such an important part of the deep state, because, it can say, we're not really a government department. We're not here to answer your questions. Go away. We're just going to do whatever we want.
Yeah. Again, I'm a little bit suspicious. Do they want to fully reform the deep states? Or Trump simply want to put in his own people in there, so the deep state is loyal to him?
It's the second, isn't it? Obviously. I mean, this is the short answer. I mean, from his point of view, again, this is the thing that you have to understand with Trump. Always is it the personal is the political, or rather the political is the personal. So he is going to say to himself, this deep state in America is a real problem. It's doing all of these terrible things. We need to end it. How do we end it? We put the right people in charge. Who are the right people? They're the people who are loyal to me. I mean, this is, I think, how Trump approaches every problem. Remember, he's not an intellectual. He doesn't apparently even read very much. He's very much an instinctive politician. He does things in this kind of very personal way. And of course, to a certain extent, it works for him. But ultimately, this is his idea. I mean, he basically wants the entire bureaucracy to be staffed by people completely loyal to himself. And for him, that is the ideal government. And ultimately, you're absolutely right. He just replaces one deep state, or rather, it keeps the deep state, but it replaces one set of people who are running it with another set of people who are running it.
Okay, from deep state to Deepseek. All right.
Yeah.
The US tech companies, they seems embraces Deepseek now. So Microsoft, the Meta, and all the others, they are using Deepseek. I mean, they admit that. They openly announced that they are using Deepseek R1 model for their products. They incorporate that into their products. Even NVIDIA, if you go to NVIDIA's website, the very front and center is now they're saying they're incorporating Deepseek R1 as well. So at the same time, legislators, so Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, he is now proposing a law to ban Deepseek and punishable in his proposal, punishable by up to 20 years imprisonment, up to 1 million fines. So it's a very severe punishment if they get passed. We don't know if it will get passed. So how do you explain that? There's two very opposing actions on how to deal with Deepseek.
It's the same inconsistency that we've seen in everything else. On the one hand, we have this, again, strident, I mean, I hesitate to call it nationalism. But anyway, this idea that, America must be first, it must be best, it must be at the forefront of everything. If the Chinese come up with something good, we need to crush it and suppress it because we can't allow it. And we certainly can't tolerate a Chinese rival in our midst. And anybody who uses it is engaging in treason, which is an absurd idea. But I mean, the logic of this proposed bill points exactly there. I mean, if you're going to send people to prison for 20 years or threaten them with that, then I mean, you're basically saying that if they use this application, then they're committing treason of some kind. I mean, it's crazy, but that is the thinking. And then you say you're much more pragmatic business people. They say, well, look, if we use this, we're going to save money, we're going to make more profit. This is going to work well for us, so let's just go ahead and do it. We don't really like the fact that it's been done and that we didn't do it first, but let's use it and let's take it over in some way, and then a couple of years down the line we can start to impose our own restrictions on the Chinese thing. But this is the tension that exists right across the whole Trump project. It's like the issue of the visas, if you remember, with Elon Musk talking about the fact that, yes, you do need people with high-level visas to come into the United States, because how can our technology companies develop without people like that from India and China and wherever? And you have the economic nationalists, and Hawley is absolutely one of those people, by the way, who say, oh, everything that isn't from America is somehow treasonous and bad, and if you accept it, you're trading with the enemy.
No.
It's a symptom. Can I just say, this is all a symptom of a deep American crisis. A truly self-confident country doesn't act but think in this way. I remember after China opened up in the 1980s, the Chinese were absolutely enthusiastic about working with American technology and getting American technology companies to establish themselves in China. And the Chinese were very, very keen to send their students to US universities to learn how to do all of these things and to develop them themselves. There was a self-confident society. What you're looking at now is a very insecure society that feels that it's losing control.
In fact, I don't know if you see, there was a footage that has gone viral in China. This woman, Melanie Hart from the Atlantic Council, she's openly talking about stealing Chinese engineers. She used the word, let's steal their engineers, let them working for us. I mean, that seems to me, it's like, first of all, when she says something like that, that admission that US doesn't have the engineers now, doesn't
Yeah.
have the talents that they can use, that you have to steal from somebody else. Okay. And then somehow believe you can steal somebody and that somebody would just come here and work for you. I don't know. I mean, I actually have seen a lot of very talented Chinese people. They're already here. I mean, so,
Yeah.
but somehow they didn't create Deepseek. She's from a think tank, but when she says something like that, it doesn't seem to me that she has done much thinking. What do you think?
Well, I mean, not only has she not done much thinking, but I mean, the ethics of it are outrageous.
Yeah.
First of all, I am not aware that China prevents its engineers from coming to work in the United States. So, I mean, why steal them? I mean, if you offer them good terms and good pay, maybe they will want to come. Just say
Some of them are here.
some of them. Could it be that you're worried that in fact it's becoming more pleasant for Chinese engineers to stay in China
Yeah.
and work there because there are many more opportunities for them and that they are better appreciated within Chinese society? So that's the first thing to say. But let's go back. Let's go back to what we were talking about China in the 1980s. Now, I don't know how many engineers China had in, say, 1980, but I'm pretty sure that in 1980, the United States probably had more. Probably had more. And certainly it had more engineering institutions, and American engineering at that time obviously operated on a much, much higher level than China did. Did the Chinese go out and steal American engineers? I mean, absurd idea. Nobody, I think, in China ever thought about that. But they set up their engineering schools. They worked hard. They trained. They built them up. It took them a long time. But now, of course, they're in that position where they have the best engineers and the most of them. And that's the way you do it. America is still a rich country. If it sits down and develops a plan to develop engineering in the United States, to build up its universities and its schools, and to make engineering an important and attractive profession for Americans, then it can do it. Doesn't need to steal anybody.
Like I said, right, there are already Chinese here. Plus, I
Yeah,
really think the US is the place that you really don't have shortage of a talent.
yeah,
Just to give you example, I
yeah,
used to have a couple to come in to help me cleaning my house from time to time. This is a couple from Armenia. They are
yeah,
chemists. They are college
yeah,
professors. So
yeah.
you can say that in the US, even the housekeepers are scientists. So they don't have shortage of
Mm,
talents.
no,
I think one of the problem, maybe a major one, is everything is become a financial sectors taking
yeah,
over. So just recently, we have in my town a girl, a very well-known girl, because she go out when she was in high school, she would go out to compete different STEM-related competitions, and she always bring back some awards. A girl like that, and I think she either went to Carnegie Mellon or some other Ivy schools. And now she's graduating. Supposedly somebody from Wall Street offered her a entry
yeah,
level job,
yeah,
$400,000.
yeah,
No tech company can give that kind of a salary to an
no,
entry level job.
no.
So the problem, I don't think, is the short of talent. It's how do you incentivize them to work for tech rather than to financial to Wall Street?
Well,
Don't you think?
exactly. I mean, it's the nature of the American economic system. The American economic system does not reward
Mm,
people who make actual goods, who use engineering skills in that kind of way. And again, the Trump people are not addressing this issue. I mean, they don't even recognize that it exists. And you're absolutely correct. Now in China, we do have a stock market there, as we all know.
mm,
But fundamentally, if you are an engineer, you want to go and do engineering, and
mm,
that is a high status, high reward profession in China, as it used to be, by the way, in the Soviet Union.
mm,
And then after the Soviet collapse, it stopped being so. But going back to what we were saying before, Putin came in about 10, 15 years ago. The Russians started to say to themselves, we can't let all our people go to America in the way that they are, and we've got to start creating proper schools and rebuilding our engineering expertise. And it takes time, and it's a very slow and difficult process, but that's what we do. Now, America can do that, but America has no incentive to do it because financial engineering is much more attractive for young people than actual engineering is. And you've mentioned engineers. I know plenty of people in the world of mathematics and advanced mathematics. Britain, for example, has always had a very, very strong tradition in higher mathematics, going all the way back to Isaac Newton and all of that. But the people at the math schools, Cambridge, and I know people at Cambridge, as you know, the elite maths centre in Britain. Well, they all tell me the same thing, that they all go off after they graduate and they join the investment companies and the banks and the hedge funds, and they come up with these incredibly complicated mathematical models, which are all intended to operate, you know, move money around and do all of the things that that does. And, you know, a lot of the academics say this is a complete misuse of our subject. It doesn't understand it really well. And it's even a corruption of it. But there it is. That is the nature of our societies in the West today.
One more thing is that I also noticed that I think group is also very important in terms of producing something.
Yeah.
Or maybe some other environmental elements that probably plays also important role. So for example, in college football, you know, in US, college, not just football, but basketball, college athletic teams are very important, right?
Yeah.
For various reasons. But you notice that those coaches that who very successful creating a either a basketball team or a football or soccer team, once they got offered twice the salary, 3 times the salary, moved to a different school, they have a hard time. Many of them have a hard time to replicate their success. So it's not just simple, somebody is a good coach, isn't it? You need a lot more than that, right?
Of course you do. Of course you do. You need to be rooted in the community which you help yourself to develop. You need to be a part of that community. But in the United States, and I'm sorry to say in Britain as well, emphasis on community is hardly ever there. If you go to the British media, the word community scarcely ever appears. And I think the same is true in the United States also.
Now, Britain seems to seize on that. They recently, again, in the Chinese social media, there was some floating some footage of the British Parliament was debating something. And somebody mentioned that they want to build a data center in Scotland, because now it seems like Britain saying, they even mentioned that the person even mentioned the Deepseek. So it opens a whole new area. Now seems like Britain can get into the AI world, and Scotland is a good place to build a data center, etc. Is that what is the discussion now? That
Yes, it is. And can I just say, in theory, Britain could be a leader in this. I mean, we have lots of people here who are very, very good at mathematics. I mean, we're not as strong in mathematics as we were 50 years ago, but we are still very strong, and we still have the heritage that would enable us to develop this. It's often forgotten, but Britain was an absolute pioneer in computers. It's, I think, completely unknown that the first plan for a computer, an actual computer, in dates from the 1820s, and it was made in Britain. It's an extraordinary machine that a man called Babbage designed after the Napoleonic Wars. He wasn't able to get people interested because they didn't understand what he was talking about. But and it would have been colossal. It would have been the size of a small building. But somebody with mathematical skill was already thinking about computers in the early 19th century, which is incredible. And then the British were amongst the leaders in computer technology in the 1930s and in the 1940s, and they were amongst the leaders in radio electronics with radars and wireless sets, radio and all of that. So we have that tradition in Britain, and we have the people in Britain, and in theory, we have the institutions as well. I mean, you do have the universities and all of this, and yet I promise you, it is not going to happen. It won't happen, and the reason is that, again, we don't have the planning systems and the infrastructure and the understanding of how to create the infrastructure that could make it happen. The only way it could be done, and the right way it could be done, and the way it perhaps ought to be done, is we go along to China. I mean, I'm being perfectly serious here. We say we have some of the best mathematicians in the world. Help us to build this data center in Britain. We can help you to develop AI, and we can do it for ourselves as well. It'll be a win-win situation for both us and you. And then it could be done, because the Chinese have that skill. And we have, as I said, all of the parts that are lying around, and if they're brought together, could make it happen. But we won't do that, and it won't happen.
Yeah. And Deepseek, actually, the more you think about it, it's actually a very significant event in so many ways. One thing is like UK now is thinking about that, and India is very big on that. They have a plan now from, I think, not that long ago, maybe just a month ago. Sam Altman was in India, and he basically told the whole world, told India, forget about following us. He used the word hopeless. He said, to really catch up with us, that is hopeless for them. But now India see, okay, what Deepseek did. So they are now have a plan saying they're going to come up with some kind of model in 8 months or something. So I think probably more than just India and the UK, probably lots of countries now thinking, okay, they can, certainly countries in the Middle East are already in contact with some of the Chinese firms. So we know that. So that I think is extraordinarily, open up for the whole world.
Correct.
One thing I also think it's which is extraordinary is that in France they are using DeepSeek R1 model, created something to diagnose the Alzheimer's patient with 94-95% accuracy, way better than doctors do. Now I remember Larry Ellison was talking when he was talking about Stargate. He said one of the things they want to do is in 10 years' time to cure cancer. Now, without DeepSeek, if they manage to cure cancer, but that technology will be controlled by very few people. With DeepSeek, actually now we can say that probably the whole world can working together to cure cancer, and it will be open for everyone. Don't you think that's very significant?
It's hugely significant. I mean, can I just say this? And this is an interesting point to make now, because, of course, the United States always says that it's the democracy, it's the country that's for the benefit of everybody. But the Chinese model appears to be much more democratic, ultimately, because it benefits people, whereas the American system, the American approach, ultimately is more oligarchic. The thing about democracy is that democracy isn't just a process. It's an application. It's how you apply it. That is at least, well, in fact, it's arguably even more important than, all of the sort of procedures and processes that people in the West talk about when they mean democracy. A system which can cure tens of millions and works cheaply is inherently a much more democratic one than a system that is enormously expensive and is controlled by very few people. By definition.
And that's why in some comments they're even saying, okay, this year's Nobel Peace Prize should go to DeepSeek. And then when I was discussing this with some of my audience, and their reaction is, no, that would be an insult to DeepSeek.
I have to say, it's very interesting to hear people in China say that, because people in Russia now increasingly saying that too, by the way. The Nobel Prize has been so contaminated now. But anyway.
But I think if from Nobel Peace Prize perspective, if they still want legitimacy and relevance, they should this year should give it to Deepseek.
Well,
I
of course
think.
they should. Of
Yeah.
course they should. They should have given. They should have given. I happen to know this. I mean, you remember I was talking to you about Mr. Prynne the other day. I haven't been able to get the biography yet, but I will soon. My wife has been away. This is why she's gone. But anyway, he has been complaining to Catherine about the fact that no Chinese writer that he knows of has obtained the Nobel Prize, the Nobel Literature Prize. And he says there's scores of them who would merit it. And all sorts of completely boring writers in other places have got the Nobel Prize. So, but, we know that this is so. We know exactly how it works. We know that Nobel Prizes are not awarded according to merit, but according to other criteria completely.
There was a Chinese author who did receive the Nobel Prize in Literature, but his books are not that popular. Not because he seems like to portray China in the old China. There's a lot of problems, and there's just making people feel that China is very backwards, very poor. With a lot of strange rituals and habit that is suppressing people's nature and stuff like that. And so there are lots of people saying this is typical of the Nobel, Prize in
Absolutely.
Literature. They have to give to somebody like that, So.
Absolutely. I mean, to tell to somebody who tells them what they want to believe about China. I mean, rights not for Chinese people, in other words, but for Westerners.
Yeah. And one more thing is that British government also proposed to they call it a copyright AI reform. Sounds to me like the British government wants to loosen up their copyright, because in the era of AI, it seems like every AI company is now stealing, you can say, copyrighted products from other companies. So OpenAI, for example, is now being sued by a number of companies, including like the New York Times. And the whole, I think, India press, they have combined launched a lawsuit against OpenAI. So that's an issue. And Britain seems, at least among others, that recognize that are proposing to loosen up. Does it mean we can forget about copyright in the future? Because if you giving AI companies the green light to do that, what stopped them from giving green light to everybody?
This is a very, very interesting topic, and it was one that I would have, 30 years ago, if you'd asked me about it, I've been very, very able to discuss very eruditely, because I used to do an awful lot of intellectual property work in the past. I don't pretend I'm fully up to date with all of this now, but I absolutely agree that I think that certainly intellectual property law, which of course includes patents and copyright, is becoming increasingly out of date with technological and scientific progress. It's becoming an obstacle. Once upon a time, it perhaps facilitated progress, because it meant that an inventor or a designer, they could design something, and that way they would accrue a benefit from it, and that incentivized them to do it in ways that was not the case before. And also, if you're talking about patents, then of course, if you're talking about registration of patents, it meant that the patent registration offices, who had their own scientific teams, actually acted as an outside scrutinizer of these ideas. So it had its benefits before, but I think it is sagging and straining to do so now, because of the completely different way in which science works today, and design works today. Now, once upon a time, I used to read economics quite a lot, and I remember, that Marx, one of the things he used to say was that eventually productive processes, the creative process, starts to collide with the social and legal obstructions, and that this is what creates tension and makes change happen, social change happen. If we start dismantling the whole system of intellectual property and copyright, patent, and all of that, it will have significant social implications as well. because always remember, a copyright is personal property. It belongs to someone. So you are in effect interfering with Western conceptions of property rights. So in a way, it plays out in the kind of way that Marx once said, that you're starting to see the old system standing in the way of the development of the productive forces. So I think we will. I mean, the British will try to do this. They will find it very difficult to do because it is so much contrary to their own ethos. I mean, the British have developed the conceptions of intellectual property way back in the 17th century. They were the leaders in this field, and it played a very significant role in early industrialization. So for them to suddenly change this, to start doing away with private property rights in that kind of way, they may be able to see the intellectual advantages of doing it, but you are going to come up against a lot of resistance from the legal world, from the business world, from all kinds of people. Whereas again, I suspect in China, where people approach these things in a completely different way, where they have a much more fresh mind about these things, where there is anywhere more collective ethos altogether, I think it might be easier.
Well, can we say in the meantime, there will be chaos, right? Because the lawsuits now against OpenAI, I mean, there is a ton of them. It's not just the New York Times and the India media. There's a ton of them, and of course they can also launch different lawsuits against all the AI companies in general. So there will be, at least for a while, chaos. Don't you think?
Absolutely. I think that's right. Again, though, is it a chaos that is going to extend to China?
Okay.
You see, this is again where China might be in a completely different position. By the way, Russia too. By the way, I mean the Russians have fairly well developed conceptions of copyright and patents, but these are, as they are in China, derivative ultimately of Anglo-American and German ideas. So, you know, they can always rethink this and can always look beyond this and say that these are a kind of ideas that work best when they're shared. Now, in Britain, that is a very difficult thing to do. And I think it's going to be very difficult in the United States also. And also, again, my very limited experience of Chinese people is that they are averse to legal proceedings. I mean, certainly other East Asians I've known are especially so, that they don't like going to court and fighting things out. On the contrary, they much prefer to work things out between themselves and to sort things out outside court structures. But again, in the Western system, it's different. There we are much more litigious and we're always suing and counter-suing and doing things with each other, and big companies especially so. So, you know, again, this may be an area where China has advantages. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I am fully up to speed with this. As I said, if you'd asked me these questions 30 years ago, I would have been in a more erudite position than I am today. But my instinct tells me that we're going to have problems with this, which in China you're not.
It's true. Yeah. In China, like you said, the people much more prefer to work things out without going to the court. Yes. Even like just traffic accidents, the police will come, and the police would even let the negotiation. How about you just pay him like a X number of money? Let's just, you know, so nobody have record, you know, what have you. Just let this solve this. The police will do that, which the US police would never do that. You would never see any, you know, US police, traffic police will come to you and saying, let's sort this out before going, you know. They would, the first thing they would just give you a notice and the court date. That's what they do, you know, whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll give you an idea of how, you know, crazy sometimes
Mm-hmm.
intellectual property rights can be in the West. A very famous case in the 1950s. For the first time, the Bolshoi Ballet from Moscow
Mm-hmm.
visited the United States, and they performed Sleeping Beauty, which is a very
Mm-hmm.
famous ballet, the music of which it was written by Tchaikovsky
Mm-hmm.
in the 1880s.
Yeah.
They were immediately sued, and an attempt was made to stop the production because the Disney Corporation had used Tchaikovsky's score for their film Sleeping Beauty. It was a cartoon film, the one where Maleficent, the mad whatever. So they said, look, we've got the right to this because we've registered it. This is ours. We've got the right to the music and to the score. So you can't perform it in the United States without our permission. I mean, this gives you an idea both of the litigiousness and of the aggressive way in which companies in the West defend their intellectual property rights and the absurdities that this can sometimes create.
The Russians must be dumbfounded, like
Well,
this is
they were absolutely dumbfounded. But I can remember how that was still being cited as a precedent. I mean, poor old Tchaikovsky died long ago, but in America, it was Disney that had the title.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you were talking about democracy, it's very important. I do
Yeah.
think that that's a very good point when you're saying in the West, that democracy is more like a process, right? So people
Yeah.
put lots of emphasis on election.
Yeah.
But think about it, election happens for me like a few seconds, a few minutes. I go in and then cast my vote, and then nothing happens. So and then there is absolutely nothing I can do or say that can make any difference
Correct.
in
Yeah.
terms of what my supposed representative's doing, right? He can do whatever he wants, and I have no control over whatsoever. Whereas in China, they don't overly emphasize this election process, but whoever is in that position, in the leader's position, they always have to constantly working to get people's approval.
Yeah.
And otherwise, there will be consequences for that.
Yes.
So for
Yes.
me, that is more democratic in the way because the person
Mm.
ultimately, how you get to the power is not that relevant to me.
Yeah.
What is relevant to me is what you do with that power, right? Yeah.
Well, democracy as an application, as opposed to democracy as a process.
Yeah. Yeah. But the West, it seems
Well,
very
I
much
mean,
emphasis on that. Yeah. On the
absolutely.
process.
I mean, to the point where, as I said, democracy has effectively broken down.
Yeah. Okay, about Ukraine. So it's
Mm.
interesting. Zelensky recently have an interview with a French newspaper, La Parisien, I think. And this is what he said. He said, if today we don't have the strength to win back all our territory, maybe the West will find the strength to put Putin in his place at the table and diplomatically deal with this war. Isn't that an admission that he's not going to take back all the territories?
Well, it is an admission. I mean, I have to say, over the last couple of weeks, Zelensky has been making ever stranger comments. I mean,
Yeah.
he's becoming more and more baroque, if you like, in the kind of comments that he's making. So, yes, it is an admission that Ukraine cannot win the war by itself. It's basically a demand that the West win the war for Ukraine. How are they going to do that? I mean, he's now also said that, if there's going to be a peace deal, but Ukraine is not going to be in NATO, then Ukraine should be given nuclear weapons. He actually said that. And he also said that the NATO armies should be deployed on Ukrainian territory to protect Ukraine. And if Ukraine isn't going to be in NATO, then the Russians need to return all the territory that Ukraine has lost because they've got what they wanted. I mean, he's becoming more and more weird in his comments. You get glimmers of truth from him, like, as I said, effectively that you can't recover this territory, but it comes with an awful lot of stuff, which is very, very odd. The Russian presidential spokesman Peskov said that this is this is almost mad, some of the things he's saying now. And I think it's probably true, actually.
Yeah, one more thing he also said is about this $100 billion missing, right? That's supposed the US have $170 billion that has been supporting, should come to Ukraine, but he said we only got 70 billion, and that 70 billion is in a weapon, US weapon. So where is that 100 billion? So the Chinese media is commenting on that. Some of my viewers also asked me, is that does it mean he's using that? Why is he talking about this? I mean, there's no secret. There's a lot of corruptions going on, but why is he making it so public? Is it because he wants to put pressure on Trump, or he's putting pressure on Biden, Biden group people, basically telling them, I know you guys are doing something illegal. You better do something to continue to help us, or otherwise I can reveal some of your dirty secret. Is that what he's trying to do?
My own view is that it's a sign that he's becoming increasingly nervous and rattled, because there's talk that the Trump people are now thinking of carrying out some kind of audit over the whole process.
Okay.
And of course, if there is an audit, it could lead back to him and to people in Ukraine. In fact, the Russian intelligence service has actually issued a statement, a report in which they say that they believe that the NATO powers, the Western powers, have decided that the time has come to replace Zelensky with someone else, and that they're preparing a campaign to discredit Zelensky using this issue of corruption and misappropriation of funds provided by the West. And it could be that Zelensky is now sensing that, and he's getting his own word in first, and he's saying, well, all this money did disappear, but it's got nothing to do with me. It never even reached me.
Okay. Well, in general, I just think he seems panicking. I think somewhere also Trump also is mentioned that they should have election, right? That Ukraine never had a proper election. So,
yeah, this is a very interesting statement because it came from Kellogg originally, who was Trump's peace envoy, but apparently other American officials have repeated it. Now, in Ukraine, this is being seen as a signal that the Trump people want Zelensky to stand down because they know that if there are elections, he will lose. So it's their way of signaling that they want Zelensky to go. We'll see.
Okay. In the meantime, something interesting also, Denmark now allows Russia to go repair Nordstream. I didn't even know that they are not allowed to go repair. I thought that Russia didn't think it's a good idea to get them repaired because they might get sabotaged, again. I thought that's the reason Russia hasn't. But apparently that's not the case. Denmark didn't allow Russia to go repair them. I find that really strange. But anyway, it seems like Denmark now allowed Russia to do the maintenance and the possible also repair. Does it mean Denmark is angry with Trump for Greenland? So now they're getting along better with Russia?
It is a major shift because, in fact, Denmark didn't allow Russia any access to Nord Stream at all. So even though this is a Russian-owned and Russian-built pipeline, after February 2022, when the operation of Nord Stream 2 was suspended, and after September 2022, when parts of the pipeline were destroyed, the Russians were denied all access to it. So they were not able, for example, to examine the damage and assess it for themselves and conduct their own forensic tests and investigations as to how the damage was done. And now suddenly the Danes are shifting position, and they're saying that the Russians can take steps to protect what's left of the pipeline and indeed to conduct repairs. And that will not only enable the Russians to gain access to the pipeline, but I understand to the actual areas of the pipeline which were damaged. And they can start to make their own investigations now, which they've been prevented from doing. So this is big. Now, why have the Danes done this? Probably at some level, they are alarmed and angry with Donald Trump and his claims on Greenland. I think this is true. But there was a report about a week ago in the Financial Times which said that because of the deep economic crisis in Europe, some European officials from certain European countries, and the implication was that they were German officials, are saying that we've got to start importing gas by pipeline from Russia again. And there was some opposition, apparently there's a lot of opposition, but I suspect that the two are connected in the sense that with elections underway in Germany, which are likely to lead to a significant change in government, and with a feeling that the war is coming towards an end. I think there may be a feeling in Germany amongst some people, people who have some influence in Denmark as well. Remember, they're neighboring countries, and Denmark is very attuned to German thinking. They may be saying to themselves, well, look, let's try after the war is over to get this pipeline gas from Russia moving again, because that's the only way we can stabilize economically the situation in Germany and in Europe. So it's a big thing. Whether these moves will lead to anything, of course, is another matter. And whether the Russians want to start selling gas to Europe in the same way again is also another matter. I should say that if you go to the Russian media and to Russian officials, their priority at this time, the thing they're talking about, is Power of Siberia 2, the new branch of the gas pipelines that are going to be built to China and which are going to pass through Central Asia.
Yeah. And the other thing happening is very little report about this, that supposedly Canada and China is in discussion, in talks about a free trade agreement, which also a shift, right? Now, I haven't found any articles from the major news outlet, except it's reported in Global and Mail, which is a Canadian newspaper, but it's behind a paywall. So I didn't get to access the whole article. This news come from the Chinese media first, but then I was looking for sources. But there seems is some legitimacy for this report. I mean, we will find out, of course, if they get to somewhere. But it seems like there is also a shift there as well. What is your take?
I think that's right. I think what is happening is that we've been through 4 mad years. I mean, just to say this, I mean, with the Biden administration, the League of Democracies against the League of Autocracies, this attempt to create divisions and barriers between the collective West and the others, confronting China, confronting Russia, breaking all the economic contacts and things like that. Now, Biden is gone, and people in the West are looking at the wreckage that he's left behind, and they're saying, well, he's gone. We got Trump, who's crazy in a different way. We've got to start thinking about ourselves once more. And that means that we've got to start restoring these old economic and trade links that we used to have with countries like China, in the case of Canada, Russia, in the case of Germany, because that is our self-interest. The Americans are talking about acting on their self-interest, and so should we.
Yeah. And talking about craziness, Trump's craziness, he yesterday, I think, shocked everybody, saying that the U.S. should take over ownership of Gaza. What is your take on that?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that it is an absolutely not just bizarre but outrageous statement. I mean, the people of Gaza, as far as I know, do not want to be taken over by the United States. They do not want to be removed from Gaza. They know perfectly well that if they are removed from Gaza, they will never go back. So they're being asked to give up their homeland, which they will not agree to, and not agree to peacefully. So it's an outrageous thing to say. And of course, it's completely unworkable, because where would these people go? Egypt won't take them. Jordan won't take them. Indonesia, which we talked about last week, isn't going to take them. The Muslim world is furious. The Arab world is furious. It just goes to show again how utterly detached from reality a lot of American policy continues to be in the Trump period. And also how Israel and the US remain joined at the hip, because what is being proposed is a monstrous war crime. I mean, it's a humanitarian atrocity. And yet the president of the United States is prepared to talk about it. And the prime minister of Israel, of course, agrees. And nobody really says anything. Nobody really pushes back. Nobody comes out and says, what an appalling thing it is that you are saying. How dare you talk in this way? Nobody does it.
What should the US do then in terms of how to solve this crisis in Gaza? Because I don't know, it seems like Israel really want to take over Gaza. That's clear, even though there is a ceasefire. Nobody believes it's going to be long term. But then people, like you said, they're not going to Jordan or to Egypt or anywhere. They want their homeland. And so here have Trump saying some crazy things about taking over Gaza. So how do we solve this problem?
Well, it's not difficult, actually. If we actually sit down and look at this in a genuine, realistic way, and remember, realistic ways are almost always the most humane ones. In terms of Gaza, you first of all tell the Israelis the war has to stop and you've got to withdraw completely from Gaza. You agree to do that 20 years ago, and now you must see that through. And then you put together a consortium of countries, including the United States, China as well, and the Arab states too. You carry out a major program of reconstruction in Gaza. You open the borders. You allow people to travel in and out of Gaza. You establish proper civilian institutions there. You don't interfere with the people who have the right to choose who governs them, but you work with the people who govern them. And even as you do that in Gaza, you work to bring the Palestinian people together, the ones in the West Bank and the ones in Gaza, and you insist that Israel negotiate with them, and you move forward towards establishing a Palestinian state. Now, if that happened, which is essentially what countries like China and other countries have been proposing, then you might actually achieve peace in the Middle East. The problem is that Israel doesn't want to do that because the Israeli government has a completely different philosophy of what it wants to achieve. It wants to control the entire territory, all of this territory, and to make it an entirely part of the Israeli state, and to settle it with its own people, and to drive out the Palestinian population because it gets in the way. And of course, the United States is going along with it. And that is what ultimately causes the crisis in Israel, the Palestinian territories, and the wider Middle East. You listen to Wang Yi, he says this. You listen to Putin and Lavrov, they say it's true. Everybody outside the West can see it. Many people in Europe can see it as well. In the United States, they won't see it.
Yeah, that's the hard part because, we had Biden, but now Trump, it seems like they're about the same in terms of how to deal with Israel.
Yeah.
They just can't stand up to Israel, seems to me, that they would do whatever Netanyahu asked them to do. Seems
correct.
Yeah. That's the hard part.
And that is the tragedy. I mean, as I said, what is being proposed here is monstrous. It isn't going to happen. It isn't going to happen because, as I said, where are these people going to go? And they don't want to go anyway. But what it means is that the crisis will go on because there's not a genuine attempt to resolve the underlying causes, which are this constant Israeli pressure.
Yeah. Trump is interesting. He's a developer. He seems like to find all kinds of projects for his development.
Yeah. He wants to turn it, as he put it, into, was it the Riviera of the Southern Mediterranean or something absurd?
Yeah. That's his solution. Okay. All right. That's all I have for now. Like you said, a crazy week, but I think I got the feeling it's going to get crazier.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we need to tie to our seatbelts. The big event that's coming is the conversation between Xi Jinping
and
and
Trump.
Donald Trump. I would love to be in on that call, by the way. I really would. But I absolutely guarantee whatever publicly is said, that Trump is not going to get what he expects from that call.
Yeah,
He
we will
doesn't
see.
understand. He doesn't understand China. He certainly doesn't understand Xi Jinping. He mistakes Xi Jinping's politeness, which, by the way, he's a very polite man,
Yeah,
a very, very polite man. He mistakes that for weakness,
yeah,
and he's completely wrong. He doesn't understand China, the Chinese people. And he doesn't understand that one of the things that you do find when you are dealing with Chinese people is that if you raise their voice, they don't.
No.
That's not what they do. They, on the contrary, they interpret raised voices as a sign of weakness, which it
Yeah.
is, by the way.
Yeah. But he's not alone. I don't think Trump is alone. There are many people in the
Mm.
US that have that
Yeah.
attitude towards China.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They think to deal with China is just getting tougher, somehow getting, have the law to ban
Yeah.
this and ban that. That's like their toughness. But it's not really solving the problem, really.
No, it doesn't solve the problem. It makes it worse. And by the way, just to quickly finish, I mean, with every single day, with all of these maneuvers, with the tariffs here, with the tariffs there, with the threats to Panama, with all of that, China wins. I mean, I'm not saying that it is wanting to play a game with the Americans, which it will win. I'm sure that's not at all what the Chinese wanted. But this is a game that the Americans are imposing on them. And the Americans are losing it against themselves, because countries around the world, Canada maybe, with this free trade, talk about a free trade zone, for example, countries around the world increasingly are going to say to themselves, who do we deal with? Who do we trade with? With the people who come along, solve our problems, are predictable and are logical and are level-headed, not with this utterly weird, unpredictable, crazy country that says one thing one day, says something completely different another day, that will one day impose 25% tariffs on you. The next day it will cancel them, will threaten you with invasion. We prefer logical, stable relations with a predictable country, which we can deal with. And if you want proof that that is how the world will work, look at Russia. I mean, 30 years ago, the Russians were all about close relations with the Americans and with the Europeans. I mean, they didn't think about China in those days. Now, of course, their major economic partner is China. And they say, thank God, we can actually work with these people. We can plan ahead. Yes, they're very, very tough negotiators. But when we have a deal, we have a deal. We don't renegotiate it every 6 months. We don't have to worry about tariffs being imposed on us from one day to the next. We can actually develop and plan, and more countries around the world are going to start thinking like this.
And even from the US perspective, I'm always find it's amazing that people like Josh Hawley and Tom Cotton, they don't seem to learn. I mean, they had this ban on the high-end chips to China, and it's backfired. Everybody can see it. That's how Deepseek got creative, because they cannot use the chips that have banned. But they don't seem to learn from that. They keep on using banning as the tool to solve the problems. So they're not learning. Right? They're not.
Well, you see, they're both drunk on power, the power that they still have and have had, and they are increasingly insecure as well. They're not a confident country. As I said, confident country looks at its problems and works hard to solve them. That's not the United States today. All the bragging, all the threats tell you the opposite.
Okay, let's talk next week. So we'll see
Absolutely.
what are the more craziness happening. Okay.
In the meantime.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Have a great week, Sophia.
You too. Bye.
Bye.